Hello and welcome to Unenroll. In today's class, we will move on to the next topic in the same unit, money banking and inflation. So we have finished with the functions of money and we have also finished with the functions of banking. So the third topic is the inflation. So first of all, what is the meaning of inflation? Inflation is if there is a continuous rise in the general price level. Okay, so it is not a sudden rise or something. For a long period of time, there should be a continuous rise in the general price level of in a particular country. So if that situation prevails in a particular country, then we say that inflation is taking place in that particular country. Inflation is happening in that particular country. Okay, so there are various types of inflation, because some of the type of inflation is favorable to the country, but then mostly inflation is unfavorable. It is having a very dangerous effect on the economic development of a country. So first let us check out what is the meaning of inflation and also what are all the various types of inflation. Okay, so this is SAQ 39, define inflation and explain its types. And so persistent or continuous rise, that's the persistent, the same meaning, so there should be a continuous rise. So persistent or continuous rise in the general price level over a long period of time, so it's known as inflation. Okay, so inflation should be happening, the rise in price level should be continuously happening for a long period of time. When it was not possible to control the level of inflation, then it is very dangerous for the country. Okay, so there is a definition given by Ackley. According to Ackley, inflation is a persistent and appreciable rise in the general level or the average of prices. So appreciable rise in the general price level, just 1%, 2% and all, it doesn't matter. In fact, 1%, 2% and all, it is favorable for the country. But if it is beyond a certain percentage, more than 6% and all, then it is an appreciable rise in the general price level. Then if that is the rise in the percentage of general price level, then we will say that inflation is set in motion in a particular country. So that is what is called as the appreciable rise in the general price level. And there are various types of inflation which can be classified into two types. First one is based on rate. So A, based on rate, and second one based on its cost. Okay, so now based on rate of inflation, it is divided into four types. So four types. The first one is the creeping inflation. So now with the creeping inflation, it is imagine like a baby is born. Okay, so initially after a certain period of time, the baby starts crawling, isn't it? So like that inflation is born, and then slowly it's like a baby, it starts creeping or it starts crawling. Okay, so when that is what is called the creeping inflation. So when do we say that inflation is creeping in a particular country? So it is like a baby when it is crawling, when the rise in price level is very slow and small, that is approximately 0 to 2% per annum, then it is known as creeping inflation. So slowly the inflation, like a baby, it starts crawling or creeping in a particular country. It is already born, so it already the inflation, the rise in price level has already started, and slowly it starts moving into the country. It starts slowly affecting the country. Okay, then the second one, walking inflation. So once the baby is slightly grown, so once the baby after a certain stage, after crawling or creeping, what the baby does, the baby starts walking. So like that inflation also starts walking. So that means what, if the rise in prices is between 2% to 4%, then it is walking inflation. Slowly the inflation is gaining momentum. So from 0 to 2%, from crawling inflation, it's becoming a walking inflation when the rise in general price level is between 2% to 4%. Then it is walking inflation. So what is the next stage when the baby grows? After walking, the baby starts running. So like that, inflation also starts running in the country, in the sense that then the general price level is still further increasing further. So running inflation, if the price rises between 4% to 10%, then it is running inflation. This is dangerous and should be controlled, because once it reaches beyond 6%, 10% and all, it's very dangerous. Once it becomes beyond 6%, then it is very difficult to control the inflation. Then we will say it is running inflation. So this is dangerous and should be controlled. Then after that, what happens, the baby starts running and it becomes very active. Then the fourth one, it's like galloping inflation or hyperinflation. The baby is becoming very active. Okay, so galloping or hyperinflation, like each one is galloping like horse galloping, it's running very fast, it's like an hyperinflation. So if the rate of inflation exceeds 10%, it is known as galloping or hyperinflation. It is extremely dangerous and damages the economy. So if it is not able, the country is not able to control the inflation at this stage, that is at the stage of running inflation, then it is very difficult to control the rise in the general price level. So if the rate of inflation exceeds 10%, then it becomes too difficult for a country to control. So sometimes it might reach even 100%, like the world war and all, Russia and all, they reach that 100% rise in the general price level. So that will become very dangerous for a particular country. So that's why before it reaches the 10%, that is when the rate of inflation is around 6%, that time itself the country should be able to control the level of inflation. So beyond that level, if it's not possible for the country to control, then sometimes it might even increase to the level of 100%, that is galloping inflation or hyperinflation. That is if the rate of inflation exceeds more than 10%. So it gallops, it hops, it jumps so fast, it is very difficult for a particular country to control the level of prices. Okay, so the same thing, you have to explain it in the form of a diagram, the types of inflation. So you can see that in the x-axis the time or the number of years is mentioned, and on the y-axis the rate of increase in the prices are mentioned. So you can see that the line from 0 to A. So 0 to A is the time period 1, that is T1. So you can see that it is the time period is more and the rise in price level is relatively lesser. So that is the creeping inflation. Then A to B, that is the time period 2. Slowly the rate of inflation is increasing. You can see that curve is a little bit steeper now. Okay, so it is becoming 2% to 4%, that is time period 2. And then B to C, then you can still see that the time period is lesser and the rate of inflation is still becoming steeper, that is 4% to 10%. That is what is known as the running inflation. And beyond that level, the time period 4, that is T4, C to D, still the general level of rise in the general price level is still becoming steeper, that is the galloping inflation, that is above 10%, that is C to D, which is also known as the hyperinflation. So this is how you can see the way in which the rate of inflation, the general rise in the price level keeps on becoming steeper and steeper, and the time period becoming lesser and lesser. That means what, within a short period of time, the rise in the price level of the country is becoming very high or becoming very steep. Okay, so this is the diagram expressing the types of so the based on this rate of inflation. Okay, then there is another type of inflation which is described based on the cause of inflation. So based on the cause of inflation, they are divided into two types. The first one is the demand pull inflation. Normally we know that whenever the the demand is more than the supply of a particular commodity, the prices will increase. So inflation is for the macroeconomic level. That is one, when the aggregate demand, the demand for all the goods and services is more than the supply of all the goods and services, then the general price level in the country will increase. So the demand is pulling up the general price level of the country. That is the demand pull inflation. So inflation which is caused by excess aggregate demand over aggregate supply. Okay, then the second type is the cost push inflation. That is the cost of production is increasing so high, so which is pushing up the price level. So inflation caused by the rise in cost of production, which may be either due to wage push. So cost push, so because of the general rise in price level of the country, then the wages will increase. So that is the increase in the cost of production for the producer. So when the cost of production keeps on increasing, the producer wants to increase the profit also. How the producer will get more and more amount of profit? Only by increasing the prices. So the profit, the wage push or the profit push. So initially what happens, that it starts with the mild inflation like 2%, 3%, 4%. So slowly it is a mild inflation, it is favorable for a particular country. So if the demand, that means what, slightly the demand is more than the supply, then only the general price level will increase, and that will give an incentive for the producer to produce more amount of goods and services, because the producer is getting more amount of profit. Okay, so like that initially it starts with the demand pull inflation. So slowly, because of the rise in the demand, the general price level, the prices of the commodities and services start increasing. So up to 2%, 3%, 4%, and beyond that level, what is happening, the rise in prices will lead to increase in the cost of production. So the demand pull inflation will become the cost push inflation. When it becomes the running inflation or the hyper or the galloping inflation, the same demand pull inflation, the rate of inflation increases, then it becomes the cost push inflation. So finally the rise in the general price level will become very difficult to control. Okay, so which is very dangerous for a particular country. And these inflation have got a very adverse effects on majority of the sections of the population of the country. Some of the section they are having the favorable effect, but majority of the sections of the population are adversely affected by the inflation. So that is the next question, effects of inflation, which I will explain to you in my next class. Okay, anyway, these are all the various types of inflation, which is also a very important 5 marks question. So you have to write this answer along with the diagram which is mentioned for the types of inflation based on rate. Okay, hope you have understood the answer. If you have any doubt, please mention them in the comment box. Otherwise, if you find this video useful, please like, share, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, so until my next class, take care. Bye bye.